Welcome, everybody. Once again, it's been an amazing Resnick Action Forum, and I'm Walter Isaacson, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you, perhaps for the last time, to the Action Forum. So thank you very much for being here. I thought I'd speak for a few minutes on the lessons that I think all of you are trying to extract from both the Leadership Network and the Action Forum, and perhaps even the Aspen Institute. And as you may notice, since I've been here 14 years, and I hope to be back, but this will be my last year as CEO, I'm also going to reflect a little bit on the lessons I've learned from both the fellowship and the institute. The words fellowship and institute are words we use often without really thinking about what they mean. But they have a similar connotation because the notion of a fellowship means it's not just about you. It's about a network of people, a community, a group of people that you're part of, making you part of something larger than yourself. And as I reflect on my time at the Institute, I think of the word institution, and I realize that although we celebrate startups and we celebrate entrepreneurs, there's something very special about being part of an institution. And by institution, I mean it was there well before you came, and it's going to be there way after you leave. And that notion of being part of something that will be there, that has been there, also reminds you you're part of something larger than yourselves. Now, for me, that gets to the notion of what I've discovered most as a biographer. We biographers have a dirty little secret. We make it seem like some great person goes into a garage or a garret or gets on a horse and things change. But what you learn in an institution and what you learn in a fellowship is that it's all about collaboration. Whether it's the great things that have been built or the great projects we're going to celebrate tonight, it isn't just individuals, it's individuals working together in a collaboration. I first realized that when we think of the great founders like Jefferson and Franklin and John Adams, and we think of them as larger-than-life people. And there was a scene when I was researching Benjamin Franklin that really struck me, because they put together a committee, the Continental Congress did, to declare why we were having a revolution. It may be the last time Congress put together a good committee, but it had Franklin and Jefferson and Adams on it. We think of Jefferson as writing this Declaration of Independence. That's not the way it happened. There were 5 different drafts that they all worked on together. And if you see the first rough draft, it's really great because there's Jefferson's greatest sentence, perhaps the greatest sentence ever written by man and certainly by a committee, that begins with, "We hold these truths to be," as Jefferson wrote it, "sacred." And there you see Franklin's printer's pen crossing it out and saying self-evident, because he believed that our rights come from rationality and reason and not the dictates of a particular religion. But it goes on to say, as Jefferson wrote, and they're endowed with certain inalienable rights. And you see John Adams put in, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. So a collaboration just on a half of a sentence helps us balance the role of divine providence and the role of rationality and reason in creating the rights that we have as citizens. If you look at all the great inventions, even of our time, of the digital age, they've all been done by collaboration. If you ask people, who invented the computer or the microchip, the 2 great inventions, or with all due respect to Al Gore, the internet, and you get to the fact that nobody knows who invented them because they were part of a team, that it was part of a collaborative effort. And that's what you learn here, being part of whatever fellowship it is you're part of. You're part of the Crown Fellowship, you're part of the Liberty Fellowship, but then you also become part of a global leaders network and hopefully part of an institution like ours. If you look at the way the internet was invented, it was done that way. It was to connect the research computers of the various universities that have been funded by the Defense Department, and they decided the best way to save money would be to network them together. They came up with a packet-switched idea, and then they delegated it to the great research universities to figure out how to connect to that packet network. The research professors did what they always do in such situations, is they delegated the task to their graduate students. And so you had 30 graduate students who worked together to try to figure out the protocols for this. But at first they didn't want to call them protocols because they didn't want it to be top-down or hierarchical or one person in charge. So they had all 30 equally in charge. And what they did was they picked the youngest of them to take the notes. And so Steve Crocker, the one who was doing it, decided to make it feel more collaborative. Instead of calling them rules or regulations, he would simply call them request for comment. And that's how the internet was built. It was particularly amazing when I was at Time magazine, we said it was done that way to survive a nuclear attack. We got a letter from Steve Crocker saying, no, we were graduate students in, the late 60s. Why were we graduate students? We were avoiding the draft, so we weren't there helping the Pentagon. We did it because we wanted it to be collaborative. And Time didn't print the letter. They said they had a better source. I went back and looked at it at one point. And the better source was the guy, Steve Lukasich, who did the funding at the Pentagon. And I asked him, and he said, yeah, we were doing it to survive a nuclear attack, but we didn't tell the graduate students that. They were draft dodgers. So tell Steve Crocker I was on top and he was on the bottom. So he didn't know what was happening. So I told Crocker that, and he said, pause for a second, he said, tell Lukasich that we were on the bottom and he was on top, so he didn't know what was happening. That's the essence of collaboration in a network digital age built on fellowship and institutions that we all help to create. The second great lesson is that even though we're told sometimes to specialize or to look at STEM education or whatever it may be, it's that the great innovations, the great fellowships, the great ability to come up with new ideas really comes from spanning a whole lot of disciplines. It comes from the people who love both the arts and the sciences. When I came here to the Aspen Institute, it had a lot of siloed programs. It all went deep. But looking at things in a silo is never the way to see the cross currents or the patterns that exist. And so that's why we tried to do things where we mix people, including at this great AGLN, the Global Leaders Network, or at our Ideas Festival, or everything we do, so that we're talking about science as well as about the arts, as well as about the humanities. When we talk about media bias, we can also be talking about things like genetic engineering. And eventually, you see how people's minds work and something deeper. I remember when writing about Steve Jobs, he always ended his product presentations with the street signs that showed the intersection of the liberal arts with the humanities. And the liberal arts with technology. And he said, that's where Apple's DNA is. That's where creativity happens. He says, if you stand both with the liberal arts and with the sciences, you make things that emotionally connect and make people's hearts sing. We hear a lot these days about artificial intelligence, but one of the most amazing things is that in the 70 years since Alan Turing said machines will be able to think, in fact, the progress made by those who combine machines with human creativity has far, far exceeded than machines alone trying to learn or trying to think. And I think it will always be that way because the collaboration I've been talking about also exists among technology, machines, and humans, and whether it's Airbnb and Uber or even the way Google does its algorithms, it's all from the creativity of humans being connected by the technology. It was also true even of Einstein, thought of as just a great scientist, but he loved Mozart, played the violin all the time. And whenever he was stymied doing general relativity, the equations, they didn't work, he pulled out his violin and said that by playing Mozart, he could reconnect to the harmonies of the spheres. To me, that led me to, I think, the greatest of all people who knew the ability of connecting the humanities and arts and sciences. And that was, of course, Leonardo da Vinci. Most people think of him as an artist. If you read the wonderful job application letter he did when he was in his 20s trying to get a job with the Duke of Milan, it's 11 paragraphs long. And the first 10 paragraphs talk about his science, his engineering, his ability to build weapons of war, his ability to make rivers divert, all these things. Only in the last paragraph does he say, I can also paint and sculpt as well as any person. Certainly he did. He goes to Milan and he paints the two most famous and greatest pictures in history, The Last Supper and the Mona Lisa. But during that time, he mainly thought of himself as somebody who loved to see the flight of birds, somebody who loved to understand the flow of waters. And as he understood the flow of waters, and he has the ripples around the ankles of Jesus in the baptism of Christ, he also understood those curls and swirls and how they worked in the heart and how they closed the aortic valve of the heart. He also did things like dissected the human eye to discover that light doesn't hit just one part of the cornea. It hits various parts of the cornea, and it's perceived differently, with the very center being the details, the tiniest of details hitting the center of the cornea, and then the colors and the shadows hitting on the side. And what he does with that is he paints the most famous smile ever painted, which if you look at it and you look directly at it, the tiniest of the details show that the Mona Lisa is not really smiling. But if you look at her forehead or you glance to her shoulder, or you move your eyes just slightly, the shadows and the colors make it smile. And so it's an uncatchable smile. The more you look for it, the less you see it, but it flickers on and off. All because he was able to mix arts and the sciences. Another thing I learned from him, Steve Jobs, and everybody else, and this is something you do, those of you who are laureates to be announced today, those of you who've done your projects, is every now and then you get encouraged by the fellowship, encouraged by the people collaborating with you and egging you on to try just a little bit harder to let your reach exceed your grasp. For Steve Jobs, they called that the reality distortion field. He kept pushing people to do things that they didn't know they were able to do. At one point, the original Macintosh, it took it 90 seconds to boot up. It was almost as slow as a Microsoft machine. And so he tells the engineer, hey, you've got to shave 20 seconds off the boot up time. Larry Kenyon, the engineer, says, look, Steve, look at this code. It's elegant. You can't push it any further. And Steve said, don't be afraid. You can do it. It was something he had learned from his guru in India. He would stare, I remember this, stare without blinking and say, don't be afraid. You can do it. And so Kenyon was so freaked out, he went back to his cubicle. After about a week, he had shaved 47 seconds off the boot-up time. He said, I was driven to do things I didn't know I was able to do. We see that all over and over again with Steve in his reality distortion field. I think the last one was when he's deciding he's going to do the iPhone. He doesn't want it to have a junky piece of plastic on the front, so he wants a piece of glass that won't smudge, won't scratch. And all the glass that were, being used he'd seen didn't meet his specifications. Finally, somebody said, call Corning, and indeed he does. And finally has a meeting with the CEO of Corning, explains what he wants. And the CEO of Corning says, well, years ago we invented something called Gorilla Glass, but we never manufactured it. and here's how it would work. And Steve said, yeah, that's what I need. I need this much by September. We're shipping in October. Linda Weeks was the CEO. I actually went to Corning, New York to hear this story because I'd heard about it from John Seeley Brown. And Weeks said, it was amazing. I kept saying, you know, we can't do this by September. We've never made this before. And he stared at me without blinking. I said, yeah, I know. And he said, don't be afraid, you can do it. After the meeting, Linda Weeks called a plant manager in Harrodsburg, Kentucky, and from a Corning plant, and he said, I want you to, shift over. I want you to start making that thing we talked about, Gorilla Glass. And the plant manager said, sure, I'll do it in a few months. I'm doing flat screen. He said, no, I want you to do it tomorrow. And the plant manager said, no. And Linda Weeks said, I just listened to him for a while, and I finally said, don't be afraid. You can do it. The upshot is, every piece of glass on every iPhone that year and every piece of glass ever shipped since then has been made by Corning because they were pushed by people collaborating with them to do what seemed impossible. And finally, the most important lesson of all is about inclusiveness. One of the things we may do wrong here is that we say, you're very special. You got tapped to be part of the Henry Crown Fellowship, or got tapped to be part of the Liberty Fellowship, or the Cali, or the Middle East Leaders Fellowship. And there were so many people competed, but it's an exclusive thing, and you got brought in. What we forgot to say, though, is that it's not about exclusivity in life. It's about inclusivity. Because in the end, you're going to measure yourself, and you're going to be measured by how many people you included in the fellowship around you, how many people you brought along after you had an opportunity. And that is truly the mark of all the great people that I've been able to write about. In some ways, we push a bit. We always tell you to follow your passion. But the motto of the Global Leaders Network and all of its fellowships is moving from success to significance. You're about to hear about the people who've done different things to do that. But in order to move from success to significance, it means that you have to overcome one thing. You have to realize it's not just about your silly little passion. It's about connecting your passion to something larger than yourselves. When I first came here, the first year we did Ideas Festival, we had the Reverend Peter Gomes, the minister, the late minister at the Memorial Church at Harvard. And when he ended his talk, he said something that I've always remembered. He talked about how, when he gave his little graduation baccalaureate sermon, some of the kids would come up to him and said, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? And one of the kids said, I want to be very successful. And Reverend Gomes said, well, that's good. He said, in fact, I want to be very successful. I think I might even want to be president. And Gomes said to him, aim higher. He said, this college has put out a lot of very successful people. It's even put out a lot of presidents. But what it doesn't do quite so well is to put out people who are really, really good. Aim higher is not just about your passion. It's about being good and connecting to the passions of other people. Everybody I wrote about did that their whole lives. You know, Leonardo, it's brilliant. He keeps we have more than 7,000 pages of his notebooks. And I get choked up when I think of the very last page that he wrote. Because of all the things he was doing, he was sometimes trying to push himself to do the impossible. And there was a math problem that was impossible, but he kept trying to do it. It's called squaring the circle. It's using a ruler and a compass only to take a square and to make a circle the exact same size. Now, for reasons that if you understand the irrationality of pi, you understand that's not able to be done. But Leonardo thought it was, and he knew that, but he thought it was important to keep trying Because sometimes when your reach exceeds your grasp, you're not going to make it. But it's useful to know why. So on that last page of his notebook, the very last days of his life, there he is with 4 different triangles, circles in them, shaded areas, still trying to conquer that unsolvable problem. And he keeps writing about it until suddenly the line breaks off and he says, "But the soup is getting cold." Apparently, he was called down for lunch, was the last thing he did. And that reminded me of Einstein, because he too, on his deathbed at Princeton, was still trying to do what we think, maybe he was right, maybe it isn't, but we think is impossible, which is a unified field theory that connects the 2 great theories that Einstein came up with, relativity and quantum theory. And he was trying for the last 35 years of his life to do a unified theory. He never could quite do it. But on his deathbed, there are 9 pages that he had his secretary, Helen Dukas, bring him in Princeton Hospital after he decided not to have an operation for a burst aorta. 9 pages of equations until it finally dribbles off. The pain gets too great, and you see the line go down the page as he tried just one last time to get us one step closer to the spirit manifest in the laws of the universe. And as for Steve Jobs, it was a summer that I was here. Some of you may remember it. I was a bit distracted, and by August, I'd been told by Steve and his doctors that the cancer had hit his bones, and I was going out to Palo Alto. And at one point, we're sitting in the backyard of his house, beautiful, with all the flowers. I said, "What did it all really mean?" He said, "Well, to me, I've begun to feel that it wasn't just about the things that I got, the success I had, but that life is like a river. And if you're very lucky and you're successful, you get to take really cool things out of that river that people before you have put in. Wonderful objects they've made, wonderful devices they've invented, wonderful ideas that they've come up with. And you measure your success by how much you've been able to get out of that river. But now it occurs to me that it's not measured by how much you take out of the river. It's about what you put into the river. And that's what's going to happen to all of us as we understand that our success comes by what we put into the river of history for others to share. And finally, for Ben Franklin, whose whole life was built around inclusivity, he gave to the building fund of each and every church that was built in Philadelphia during his life, because he knew that the secret to what America was all about was people of different races and creeds and colors and backgrounds would all work together if it worked well. And at one point, he wrote the fundraising document for the first sort of new hall, it was called, for visiting preachers who came to Philadelphia. And the first sentence says, "Even if the Mufti of Constantinople were to send somebody here to preach Islam to us and to teach us about the Prophet Muhammad, we should offer a pulpit and we should listen, for we might learn." And on his deathbed, he was the largest contributor to the Mikveh Israel Synagogue, the first synagogue built in Philadelphia. It was that type of fellowship, that type of institution, that type of inclusivity that brings us to something larger than ourselves that they were creating back then that we're still fighting for, both in the world today and at home. So thank you all very much. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you.
Long glass, right drink. So we're going to do a little toast.
Oh, wow.
Come on to the side here.
I know what it is.
First.
Okay, I'll go first.
I'll go first. Or unless
Whatever you
want.
want.
Go ahead.
Hi, darling. Yes.
Wow.
So I'd like to raise a glass to Walter for all he's done for the Institute and all he's done for me personally. When Walter came to Aspen, he was both a splash of cold water and a breath of fresh air. He shined a light on just how deeply troubled the world is and can be, and he also taught me how to do something about it, starting with this drink. This is a Sazerac. And the
Wait, I'm sorry to interrupt. Bill Goldring, stand up, the owner of Sazerac Liquors from New Orleans, and my guest.
Way to go.
This was not for you, I didn't know.
So the Sazerac was invented during the Civil War when they had troubles too. And it was invented in Walter's hometown of New Orleans. It's also the perfect metaphor for the world he's shown me. Here's the recipe I know you're all dying to know. Crush ice in a glass until it's lost all hope. Mix with just enough absinthe that you start seeing things. Age it with a fine cognac that's been around the block. Add sugar for sweetness, bitters for humility, and finish the whole thing with a thin peel of all the lemons that life throws at you. Trust me, after a few Sazeracs, you'll forget the troubles of the world too. But one thing we will never forget is our dear friend Walter. Here's to Walter, a true Renaissance man and a true Renaissance friend. God bless you.
That was really beautiful. This is wonderful. Can we get drunk?
Can we get to drink? Cheers.
Really amazing. I'm about to cry.
I've been crying for
And this
2
is a
months.
very good Sazerac.
It is. It's a good. We love the Sazerac. It's delicious.
I too have a toast that I want to offer to you, Walter, and you know that I'm, and thanks to Denise, a great fan of the Sazerac as well. You know, it was back in September that Linda and I were exchanging emails talking about what might be the theme of the next Resnick Aspen Action Forum. And I sent her a note saying, what do you think about having the next Action Forum focus on something we call the Great Reset? And she wrote back and said, I think it's a great idea, but little did we know that when we selected that topic, Walter, that it would be a reset moment for the Aspen Institute itself. I was in Shanghai. I landed, I think, on a Saturday, and I had an email from Walter, kind of cryptic email from you. I don't know if you remember, and it said, when you get a chance, call me. I'd like to talk. And I said, sure. We're in different time zones. I'm not sure it's going to work right now. Let's figure out a time. Can we make it tomorrow? And he said, no, that's fine. There's no rush. But I do remember that I called you, Walter, and you said to me, Peter, I want to share some news that I've already shared with our chairman, Jim Crown, and that's that I'm going to be leaving the Aspen Institute at the end of the year. It took my breath away. I had to sit down. I was sitting in my hotel room with the phone. And I said to him on the phone, and actually in several texts over the next few hours, you'll remember saying, Walter, don't do it. I mean, this is not a good time. I mean, we're just getting started here. And you know what he did? He looked at me without blinking, and he said, don't be afraid, Peter, you can do it. I came out of the formal part of my Henry Crown Fellowship program in the year 2000, and I was invited onto the Board of Trustees, and I think it was in 2002 or 2003, I'm not entirely sure. If I had to choose the image of the Aspen Institute before Walter, I think the best image I could come up with as I think about Walter was the closed door. The Institute was world-renowned for its very important gatherings that were taking place behind closed doors. And a lot of important gatherings of all sorts, from some gatherings on national security to gatherings on education, from gatherings, yes, on leadership. If I had to sum up Walter's legacy, he arrived and he threw open the doors. The Ideas Festival, the Security Forum, Spotlight Health, the Resnick Aspen Action Forum. Sunlight, Walter said, inclusion. He said, if we have good ideas, if we're doing truly important work, why are we keeping it so secret? And that was really Walter's idea. We need to throw open the doors of the Aspen Institute. We need to share what we're doing with the world. I joined Walter in my current role in 2004, not without some trepidation, you'll remember. I was CEO of an organization called TechnoServe. I'd been running it for 8 years. I'd been there for 17 years. And Walter, I think we met, it was a snowy day in New York. I think he took me to the Harvard Club. He soon learned that I don't own a tie, and so he stopped doing that. But he told me he loved the idea of globalizing the Aspen Institute, and he'd seen something that I'd written a few months before, and said, why don't you come and join me? And I told him, Walter, I'm a little nervous. I'm running something now. I don't know if I want to work for someone else. True. And he said, look, he looked at me. He promised me his full support. He promised me a minimum of interference. And he promised me the last weekend of every April free so I could go with Denise to the Jazz Fest. That was one of the things I had to negotiate when I came to the Aspen Institute, the New Orleans Jazz Fest, for those of you who don't know that. I've never looked back. I spend a lot of time in China these days, and I read all sorts of things from China, thanks to our fellows who are here tonight. It was Lao Tzu that said, when the best leader's work is done, the people say we did it ourselves. Well, at the end of the day, I know in my heart of hearts that without Walter, none of what I or my team have done would have been possible, because we did it precisely because of you, Walter.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very, very much.
That's pretty awesome. You know, yeah.
Last thing, on behalf of the Aspen Global Leadership Network, Walter, we've put together this little book of photos. We've asked our fellows to all sign it for you. We're not done yet, so we're going to take it back from you afterwards, but I wanted to hand this to you and let you know that all of us in the Aspen Global Leadership Network are so incredibly appreciative of you giving us this platform to do what we do in the world. Thank you.
Wow. Okay.
For the past 10 years, the John P. and Ann Welsh McNulty Foundation has supported the work of the Aspen Global Leadership Network and its fellows in many, many ways. Ann, you and your team have supported us for the training of our many moderators we have here in the room. You've provided scholarships for fellows from around the world to come to our global seminars, to attend the Resnick Aspen Action Forum. You've provided training, financial support for so many promising projects and ventures of our fellows. And of course, you've created the John P. McNulty Prize. The one thing I've noticed more than anything about the work that you've been doing is that you've done all of this out of a deep sense of love. And it comes across in all of our work together. So I want to thank you for that. And so tonight, to kick off our celebration of the 10th anniversary of the John P. McNulty Prize, it's my pleasure and my honor to welcome Ann and Johnny McNulty to the stage.
I was going to say, do we get this next?
Never leave a bar.
No, here, I'm going to get a water, John. Thank you, Peter. Good evening. I'm happy to add our welcome to this evening celebrating the 10th year of the John P. McNulty Prize. I, too, have to give a very personal thanks to Walter Isaacson. When we first met Walter in 2003, he had just become the new CEO of the Aspen Institute, and he invited John to join the board. Now, one of the board's first big decisions was the decision to build this iconic structure. And it's a sign of how well John and Walter got along and how persuasive Walter is that he got John to be one of the first donors to this building. And that's why today we are all sitting in the McNulty room. So Walter, ever since then, in the past 10 years, has always encouraged us to think big about the McNulty Prize. And we have benefited so much from his genius and his generosity. I would also like to thank my fellow trustees who have stood with me back from when the prize was just an idea and who work with us every year in this whole McNulty Prize process. Bill Mayer, Margot Pritzker, Bob Steele, and now Mike Klein. So the theme of this year's forum is the Great Reset. Now for me, a great reset occurred almost 12 years ago when I got a call that John had suddenly collapsed and died. This was just 2 weeks after his 53rd birthday. My children were then 14, 17, and 20. My son Johnny is here with me tonight, and Bryn and Kevin are here in spirit. So what do you do in the face of such loss? How do you channel that anger and the pain and the grief to find something bigger than yourself? How do you translate missing a smart, competitive, charismatic, and fun person into building a new kind of positive legacy? It's really not easy. Ultimately, our family's answer was to create this prize to remember John, to honor his leadership and his commitment to fostering opportunities for others, for telling others it's hard, you can do it. In fact, one of John's greatest talents was urging young leaders to reach their full potential. And we think through this prize, he still does that. So all of us here tonight are committed to the common good. All of us committed to sharing in each other's struggles. And that commitment really is at the core of the McNulty Prize and at the core of the Aspen Global Leadership Network. So I have to say, it still is hard for me to believe that we are here tonight and it is 10 years, that this is the 10th year of the McNulty Prize, and that we have now honored over 40 courageous leaders from around the globe. So I'm going to take you back in time to look at our video depicting some of that 10 years. We are all faced with a choice. Will we stay in our worlds perfectly content to look out from behind our fences, or will we show a conviction to act?
At a certain point, we hear a call, a calling to be part of something larger than ourselves.
We couldn't wait. We had to start something.
If we don't do this, we're not sure anyone else will.
These are people that are living their daily life, and they think, I need to figure out how to turn what I'm doing into something that will help others.
Ghana has a lot of challenges. We have this phenomenon. If we change the way we educate leaders in Africa, that we will profoundly change this continent. Before starting at Chassis, I was very busy at Microsoft. It was all about technology, all about product. I had decided that returning to Ghana was the most important thing I could be doing. I was afraid that it's going to fail.
I think a lot of what holds us back are delusions about our inabilities, and it's not reality. And in reality, we are all more capable than we think we are.
This community encourages you because you feel you're not alone.
What this prize has done is expand the idea of what's possible.
I was someone who really wanted to live a life that made a difference. It took us 10 years to reach 1 million customers, and this year alone, we'll reach 1 million people with sight-restoring eyeglasses.
When I first received the McNulty Prize, Chassis was operating out of rented buildings, and we were just planning a permanent campus. Today, Chassis is a very different place. When I walk onto our campus, I feel a real sense of pride about what we've achieved, all of us.
Class of 2017,
Congratulations.
The moral imperative is to really understand what we owe each other. Societies are better if we are enlarging our own views and seeing what we can do to help others.
We have seen a range of courageous leaders around the world who are taking their entrepreneurial talents and their resources to really try to address intractable problems.
The most important thing is that we don't give up. We all have a duty to make this world a better one.
Thank you. That's very uplifting, isn't it? I have to recognize our team from the foundation is here. In particular, Director April Aj and Nina Sawhney are here, and many of you fellows know them well. And April in particular is a genius behind the videos that we are so proud of, and they're so beautiful. So over these 10 years, we have expanded our vision to go beyond just making the award for the prize. And the videos are part of that. And also, this is what led us to create the case studies, pivotal moments that many of you received yesterday. And this was, in fact, the fulfillment of the McNulty Foundation's action pledge last year, at last year's Action Forum, to put a collection of these case studies together, which we did with our team and with Anne Lamont and her team in South Africa. Now, tonight, I'm happy to announce several new initiatives. First, we have heard from the laureates over the years how critical the funding is to their ventures. So tonight, going forward, we're increasing the amount of an award that goes to each of the laureates from $10,000 to $25,000. And second, we too, Walter, are writing a book. This is not going to be the Walter Isaacson Da Vinci epic, but nonetheless, we are putting together what we think will be a useful and engaging book, which is meant to inspire people beyond this community to answer the call. And finally, our other action pledge for this year, for 2017, is to create a new fund in partnership with others to directly support ventures at different stages during the process. This is clearly, at this point, what you folks all call the ideation stage, but we will work it out. As you can tell, we could not be more excited and more proud to be celebrating the 10th year and more happy about the next 10 years. We do have a new judge this year, Peter mentioned yesterday, Darren Walker, the president of the Ford Foundation. And in that role, Darren obviously sees good work around the world. But yet he stressed how important it is that we hold up these examples and that we listen to the moral imperative to act. We have 3 of our jurors here tonight. Many of you know the courageous Alara Otuno, and also the global humanitarian and business leader, Brizio Biondo Mora. In addition, of course, we have the wonderful and never shy Madeleine Albright, who certainly has more than ever to talk about. So Madeline has more than ever to talk about this year, actually even this week. Now, Madeleine Albright may not need an introduction, but she has certainly earned one. She served as Secretary of State under President Clinton. You may remember that she was confirmed as Secretary of State by a vote of 99-0 by a GOP-controlled Senate back when those things still happened. Madeleine was the first woman to serve as Secretary of State, and she was an incredible pioneer. She really changed the face of America at home and abroad. She continues to be a unique and powerful voice for democracy and human rights around the world. She's currently chair of the Albright Stonebridge Group and a very popular professor at Georgetown University. She has been the chair of our McNulty Prize jury since the beginning, and we are so grateful for her involvement and leadership over the years. So please welcome Secretary Albright.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and I'm so delighted to be here. Last time I was introduced by somebody, they said Madeleine Albright doesn't deserve an introduction. So thank you for your lovely introduction, and it's wonderful to be here with this, on this incredible evening with this great group. I am so proud to be a part of the Aspen Institute and the fellowship. And Walter, I think all the things that you said are so meaningful. You have been the most amazing leader of this organization, and we all value everything that you've done as a friend and as a leader, and we will miss you, but we're not going to let you go. So thank you very much for all that you have done. And Anne, I think it is really remarkable that this has been going on for 10 years, and it has really been an amazing experience in what you have done, not only to honor your husband and your family, but all the ideas that need to be put into play, and the whole idea of action. You are the epitome of action. One of the things I love about having become a part of the Aspen Institute are the friends that I've made, and I count you as one of my very best, and thank you so everything that really has happened here. I think reset is a very important message. I've just come from the swamp to the mountain. We do need a reset in so many different ways, and this is a very complicated time. I have spent a lot of time teaching about it, a lot of time thinking about it, and hoping that, in fact, kind of the real message out of meetings such as this is that good people working hard can make a reset and turn this world, which is a mess at the moment, into something that is exactly what we need in the 21st century. And the McNulty Prize, I think, is one of the best vehicles for this. I have to say I've been asked to do many difficult things. Choosing the winners is among the most difficult, as we really sit and talk about the incredible people that have submitted their ideas and are really there to carry them out, and to not just be thinking, but to be doing and really making a difference. And so I do think that the theme of the Great Reset fits in every way in terms of inspiring people to action, because people truly are wondering what our relationship with our leaders are, how do citizens fulfill their responsibilities. So I am truly honored to have been part of this whole process that is based on these very principles, and we saw so many people. So the laureates are people that go in to do a variety of really impressive things, whether it's an ophthalmologist or somebody who's running a business, and I think that everybody wants to do more, and in fact, getting the prize is just the beginning, as far as I can see, and really having followed out people's what they're doing. So I do think that what is so essential here, these are people making difference in a variety of areas with a moral principle behind it. So I am truly honored to be a part of it, and I thank you so much, and please let me stay another 10 years. So I think it's great. I'd like to congratulate Anne and Johnny and everybody involved in this, and Walter, again, thank you for putting it all into the most wonderful and meaningful perspective. And so now, Johnny, I think you're going to introduce our laureates.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Secretary Albright. I am Johnny McNulty, and it is my pleasure to introduce this year's McNulty Prize laureates. Our first laureate has built on decades of development expertise, working with the United Nations and global communities to launch a worldwide movement of youth local councils. Please welcome to the stage Lana Abu Hijle.
Thank you. Wow. Thanks to the McNulty Foundation for this great honor for the second time. I'm Lana Abu Hijle from Palestine, founder of the Youth Local Councils venture. And I chose to work with youth because I wanted to invest in the future. I wanted to prepare youth who are good citizens and ethical leaders of this world. With 52% of our population under the age of 25, living in marginalization, under occupation most of their lives, minimal opportunities, they're losing hope and falling into despair. And I find that to be extremely dangerous. So we established the youth councils as a platform for these youth to engage in positive service in their community, to learn about good governance and practice it. We provide them with extensive training in what democracy means, what accountability means, and a lot of skills development. They use these skills to implement hundreds of projects that solve community problems. So they are no longer the problem, they're problem solvers. We established already 20 councils in the West Bank. More than 17,000 youth have been through the process. And our real success, actually, as we set out to prepare the future leaders, was demonstrated 2 months ago in May when we had our formal elections. 2 of our alumni ran for the office and they won at age 24. Thank you. That's their success. Also, 2 years ago, Dr. Albright challenged me to take this successful model global. Well, now we are in Honduras, established councils there. We are in Ukraine, about to launch them. Hopefully, this is the nucleus of a global movement for youth and good governance. I would like to thank again the McNulty Foundation for their recognition. This is recognition for the youth out there, for their resilience, for their willingness to act to make this world a better one. Also, I would like to thank Peter and the Aspen Institute, because without this fellowship, we wouldn't be here. You allowed us, you gave us this opportunity and the chance to give back again. I would like also to thank Global Communities team. They were wonderful supporters. But most importantly, to the youth of Palestine, to the youth of Honduras, and to the youth of Ukraine, and to the youth of this world. Our hope is in you. Lead us to a better world. Thank you.
Our next laureate is an agriculture executive who saw his company had the expertise and global market access to train formerly displaced Ugandan farmers. For Trail, Bruce Robertson. Bruce couldn't be here in person, but let's hear from him over video.
Hi, I'm Bruce Robertson, founder of Trail. Northern Uganda was one of the most dangerous places on earth. Joseph Kony's LRA would invade villages, kill the adults and babies, and abduct the children as sex slaves and child soldiers. But in 2006, they were evicted. I'd been a cotton ginner in Uganda and knew that the north was incredibly fertile and had great people. So I invested in a cotton ginnery there. But in my business, you need crop. And a whole generation of farming skills had been lost in the refugee camps. So I made an action pledge to train 35,000 farmers in basic agricultural skills. We faced two main obstacles. Virtually all the farmers were illiterate, and they were spread over a vast area with terrible roads. To get the message across, we created diagrammatic, colorful images that could be understood by everyone. To get the reach, our core management trained field officers who trained lead farmers, who trained farmers deep in the rural areas. We ended up training 60,000 farmers, and the impact was enormous. Yields increased by up to 150%. And cash and food crop yields are the very foundation of rural development. Our new challenge is that in the last year, we've had 1 million refugees come from the South Sudan into our area within a 30-kilometer radius of our operations. We're now applying our farmer training methods to help them re-establish their lives. I'd like to thank very much the McNulty Foundation for the honor of becoming a laureate. And I'd like to say to all of you there, I really miss you.
Realizing that an ounce of civic engagement is worth more than a pound of outside help, this public policy expert established Voluntarios de Panama. Please welcome Carolina Freire.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the McNulty Foundation for this honor. I believe in the power that each individual has to make a difference, to transform lives, and to transform communities. In my country, Panama, however, volunteerism some time ago was not part of the culture. It was not recognized, it was not promoted, and it was not organized. At the same time, we still face significant challenges economically, socially, and environmentally that require all of our citizens to participate, not only the government to solve our problems. So we decided to start a movement to move people from indifference to action, to channel their talent, to channel their time towards thousands of organizations and causes that need their talent to resolve those issues. We started with an online tool, a volunteering online tool that combined with a cross-sector of alliances with the public sector, the private sector, non-governmental organizations, universities, schools, and national days of service have mobilized over 100,000 volunteers in the last 5 years. So today, 5 years later, Panama is a country with a growing volunteer culture. It's a country, most importantly, where people themselves, citizen participation, are transforming those lives, are transforming those communities with their own actions. And now the movement is theirs, it belongs to them, and we just want to help it grow. Thank you very much to the McNulty Foundation for this honor, which I accept in recognition of all the volunteers in my country. I believe they represent the best of our society. I also want to thank very especially the Aspen Institute and the Cali Foundation and my family for all their support. Thank you very much. Congrats.
As the Middle East producer for CBS News and an Emmy Award-winning journalist, our final laureate realized the incredible value and scarcity of reporting steeped in local knowledge. So he began Syria Direct. Please welcome Amjad Tadros.
Well, thank you all. I'm really honored and humbled to be here, and thanks to the McNulty Foundation. Well, I'm a storyteller, and my story started 5 years ago when the start of the Syrian revolution. And I realized then that there was a problem of the news coming out of Syria. It was full of lies and propaganda. And there was a need for an independent and accurate news source to know what's going on in that country, and truth was being lost. So I set up a newsroom in Amman, Jordan, manned by Syrians and American volunteers to try to find out what the hell is happening in that country. And alongside, we set up a training center whereby we train Syrians of the importance of finding and telling the truth of what is happening in their own country, and we gave them the tools to tell stories that would not have been told otherwise. Stories, for example, about Syrian orphans in a country where adoption is not allowed. What is the future for those babies that are victims of the war? And so far, we have trained 104 aspiring Syrian journalists, and we created one of the most trusted news sources about Syria that is used by most of the governments, NGOs, the international media, and we have kept the story of Syria alive. Thank you. Thank you all.
Come to our man, it's yours.
I will. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, please give a big round of applause for the 2017 McNulty Prize laureates. Now, I would like to introduce the 4 outstanding leaders on our panel tonight. All 4 are doing very different work, but what they share and what all our McNulty Prize laureates have in common is that they've all made a choice. Jordan Caslow, a successful eye doctor, chose to start Vision Spring, which has now delivered over 4 million reading glasses to hard-to-reach communities. Gisela Sanchez is an engineer by training and a food industry executive by profession, who launched Nutravita, a line of fortified food products to eradicate malnutrition. Patrick Awua enjoyed a successful career at Microsoft before returning to Ghana to found Ashesi University to build the next generation of ethical leaders. And finally, tonight's panel will be moderated by Dele Olojide, our favorite fearless journalist who returned to Nigeria after a Pulitzer Prize-winning career in New York. He exposed corruption at the highest levels, ousted a president, and weathered the consequences. Please welcome to the stage Jordan, Gisela, Patrick, and Dele.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Before we get into this, I just want to quickly say that Bruce really meant it when he said he missed all of you. He and his family were already driving across the country and were in Yellowstone National Park when he received message that his father was dying. So they turned around and went back to South Africa. His father waited for him and passed away 2 hours after he got to his bedside. So he sends his greetings and his thanks to all of you. So here we are again, the lovely crew. Jordan Castle must be tired of appearing before you fellows by now.
I love it.
All right, he does say he loves it. Jordan, of course, is the inaugural winner of these prizes and blazed the trail for the rest of us to follow. Jordan created Vision Spring, as you've seen on the screen, and I don't need to go further into the details other than that he's doing an extraordinary work in building something that is rapidly expanding. And as you saw in the movie, it's going to have another 1 million pairs of glasses distributed this year. Thank you, Jordan, for joining us.
Thank you, Tony.
Gisela is a good friend of mine from Costa Rica. One of my favorite memories of our visit to Costa Rica for globalization was all the fellows and we moderators all marching off to go feed poor people in San Jose as part of Gisela's program, Nutrivida. It was a really wonderful afternoon of fellowship and community. And I'm very interested in talking to you tonight about how the project has evolved. And finally, my West African brother. Everybody knows that Ghana is Nigeria's 37th state.
We beat you the last time in soccer.
And there was a few months ago in New York, there was this raging fight online on social media as to whether the best jollof rice was to be found in Nigeria or in Ghana. Luckily for us, Patrick Awuah has not been concerning himself too much with the quality of the jollof rice, but with educating the minds of young citizens of West Africa. And the only reason you know that, really, that Ashesi University has since become probably the best institution of higher learning in West Africa is because the Nigerians are now trying to scam them over admissions. Send fake emails. If you pay me $10,000, I guarantee you admission to Ashesi University. So you have truly arrived, Patrick Awuah. Welcome. So I'll start with Jordan. I'm very interested in stories of transition, of pivots, of resets. Because in a way, if you think of the McNulty Foundation as Anne's venture, and she stuck with it for the past 10 years, and it's now evolving in an even more powerful direction, not the least of which there are people like us who only got $10,000, and these guys are now getting $25,000, right? So if you look at your ventures and how these evolved over the years, I'm interested first in going to Jordan to say, when you started Vision Spring, what did you have in mind and what is it now? And if you look out to the next 10 years, what do you see it becoming?
Thank you, Deli. I'd like to start. I know, Ann, you don't love when we thank you from the stage, but I want to thank you for not only what you and your family have done for Vision Spring and me personally, which is significant, but maybe more importantly for the example that you've set for all of us of how to take loss and struggle and transform it into beauty, mattering, and reducing the suffering of others. So thank you so much. In terms of Deli's question, when we started Vision Spring, my goal was to reach 1 million people a year. Little did I know that that was just the beginning. As we like to say at Vision Spring, small is beautiful, but big is necessary. It's necessary because there are, in our case, over 2.5 billion people in the world who lack access to a simple product that's been around for 700 years that has transformed many of the people's lives in this room. It's not about the glasses. It's about what glasses enable us to do. It enables children to learn. It enables people in the workforce to be more productive. It enables us to be safe on the roads. It enables digital democratization. If you can see your cell phone, you can have access to all the information in the world now. So this is an incredible enabling technology. And so when we set out to reach 1 million a year, it wasn't clear to us all of the incredible impact that this simple technology could have. And it became profoundly more apparent as we started to grow. So where do we go from here? Well, as a social enterprise, as Walter was mentioning, there was just no way that one enterprise, whether it was a small social enterprise or even a multi-billion-dollar eyewear company like Luxottica, could solve this problem on its own. It became clear that there were some barriers that fell clearly out of the ability for any one enterprise to address, whether it was regulatory barriers, supply chain barriers, awareness barriers, and the list went on. So it became really apparent to me that if I was going to transformatively scale this organization and this effort, it was going to require engaging governments, the private sector, and NGOs. It was going to require engaging the education community, the labor community, the road traffic safety community, the digital economy community, and so forth. And so we've set out for what we're calling now a system change organization, and we've launched, with the help of the Braddock Fellowship and my mentor Bill Mayer in that instant, a new organization that we're calling the Alliance. And our hope is over the next 10 years, we'll get to about 100 million people.
So thank you, Jordan. That sounds like a really big number to me. And another way of looking at big numbers, I think, is to look at the penetration levels that Gisela's venture has achieved in Costa Rica, a country of about 4.5 million, and her products, nutritional products, reach 1.5 million poor citizens, a full 33% of the entire country. Tell us about how you got there and where you're headed next.
So 4.5 years ago, I was in one of our seminars, and Stace Lindsay told us about a project that we have to work on. And I was really nervous about it and thinking that I really wanted to work on something that was close to my heart. And I thought about children because it's, for me, the most important thing I can do with my life. And when I thought about children, I started thinking, what is the most important thing for them? And immediately came to food. If you don't have enough food, or if you don't have the right food, you will not be able to achieve your full potential. And when Walter was talking about you as leaders fulfilling your full potential, I was thinking about the children. If you don't have the right nutrition, you will not be able to become a leader, not even to fulfill your full potential. So we decided to create a social business, learn from a Nobel Peace Laureate, Professor Mohamed Yunus. I chased him all over the world to convince him to join Nutrivida and be part of our venture. And we started producing food, actually, using food that people normally eat in our countries, but which not necessarily have the right quality in terms of the nutrition. So we decided to create food, prepare these products as fortification vehicles, and get the education on nutrition to the different places, and use the forces of the market to make it sustainable. So because I work for a company, I decided that we don't want to give away this food. We want to price it as low as possible. The margin is really small, but it's the most easiest way to get your impact without needing a lot of money all the time. So we have been able to place 7.8 million meals in our country since the beginning of Nutrivida. And we decided to implement like a Tom Shoes model for the last year. So now we're giving away, for every single package of Nutrivida that somebody buys, we give away a meal for somebody who is not even able to buy it at the lowest price that we have in the market. So that has been really helpful to increase the social impact.
Thank you.
What is coming? We are expecting to enter the Dominican Republic. We thought about Honduras first, but because things are so cheap there and the quality of our raw materials is not allowing us right now to enter that market, we're going to enter the Dominican Republic, and we have an opportunity to pursue an Asian market too. So looking forward to that.
Thank you very much, Gisela. Patrick, so this is taking you 15 years.
Yes.
Right? And clearly, where you started off is still where you are now. And it's been a lot of twists and turns along the way. In what ways have you been surprised the most by how much you've been able to do, given the inherent obstacles in barely functioning countries, which makes the operating environment exceptionally problematic?
So one of the things that I've been most surprised by, when we started, I had given us a 30-year window before we would start to see real results, as our 20-something-year-old students would be in their 50s and be in leadership positions. And the big surprise to me was that within the first 5 years of our first graduating class, we were seeing alumni who were doing some really profound things that were literally impacting millions of lives.
Give us a couple of examples of that.
So an example is somebody who 2 years out of college was heading the Treasury Department of a major bank in Sierra Leone, or someone who a year out of college was actually the first computer scientist in the Ghana Armed Forces and was leading a squad of peacekeepers in Liberia, or the lead Ghanaian engineer on our biometric registration for elections was an Ashesi alum, and he got into that position within 5 years of graduating. And that was, that's elections for a country of 28 million people, and created the sort of the cleanest election registry we've ever had.
Hence the possibility of defeating the incumbent in the last cycle of elections.
That's right. And peace and stability and, sort of more increasing faith in the outcomes of our elections. And so seeing that trajectory, and then there were people doing other things, in the financial services, getting jobs in major banks, and then asking questions like, why are they not reaching out to the poor, to the unbanked, and getting the banking system to start to react to the more marginalized population of our country. So that's been my biggest surprise, a very pleasant surprise.
Okay, sometimes you measure look at the numbers and say, well, your enrollment is now going to move from about 900 to 1,000 by next year, and that's one metric.
Right.
But it seems to me that seeing the examples of the students you trained to become leaders in their communities is a different level of measurement that gives us some indication that this might be working, right?
That's right.
So what I'd like to learn from you is whether the way you're structuring your curriculum is specifically addressing that, or whether it's happening by chance.
Well, it's about a number of things. One is clearly the curriculum is designed to integrate the liberal arts with technology and business management to teach critical thinking.
Walter was
right, what Walter was talking about.
Did he look at you?
And the curriculum, actually, I was very inspired by the leadership seminars here, and we now have a leadership seminar series within our curriculum that teaches ethical leadership and empathy. And then there's just the pedagogy, how we approach our students. We have this attitude of a profound confidence that our students can be ethical agents in our society. And we challenge them not only to have the conversation about what the good society is or should be in our country and on our continent, but to create one on their own campus. And so the campus culture that enabled Ashesi students to be the first in our country to elect a woman president of student government is very important. The campus culture that enabled them to develop the first honor system, student-run honor system in Africa, is very important. And as they've done those things, we see ripple effects in other institutions. And so within 3 years after the first woman as student government president at Ashesi, there were 5 universities in Ghana that had elected women as president of student government. And this is a country that had celebrated 50 years of independence without this phenomenon, and suddenly it's become normalized. And today we see there are 2 secondary schools, high schools, whose students have enacted honor systems. And so this is a challenge to everybody. And I give this example because I think the curriculum and pedagogy is one thing, but there's also sort of the challenging students to start practicing great leadership today is important. And then our own emphasis within the administration and the faculty to model a certain behavior for our students has also been crucial.
Thank you, Patrick. Jordan, at some point you decided not to take a hands-on role in Vision Spring and its associated programs. When did you recognize it was time for you not to do that anymore? And what role are you playing now? Is this purely strategic?
There were 2 critical moments. The first was exactly 8 years ago, and I remember it because I was in Yankee Stadium with my son Bryce, who at the time was 10 years old, and it was a 15-inning game, 0-0, so I had a lot of time to think. And there was Yankee Stadium, filled to capacity, 50,000 people, and that was the first year that we hit 100,000 people in terms of serving their needs. And I thought very proudly, wow, we filled 2 stadiums up with people who could see better because of our effort. Yeah. And then, bottom of the 15th, A-Rod hits a walk-off homer, and we pour out of the stadium into the subway. And for those who've been to New York and have been on subways, there's sometimes you're on subways where you're not sure if it's a runaway train and that the conductor's lost the brakes. And that was one of those trains. It was just crackling like this and that. I was like, am I going to die on this train? And I realized at that moment that if that train derailed and I met my maker, there would be no way that Vision Spring would put 100,000 people into classes the following year, because it was way too dependent on me. I was the chairman of the board, I was the CEO, I was the chief fundraiser. So the next week, I called one of my mentors and friends and implored him to be the chairman. And over a 3-year period, I made myself increasingly less significant in the organization. And then the board all turned to me and said, well, now what are you going to do? We don't really need you anymore. And it was good timing because this is when I was starting to think about moving from an enterprise approach to solving the problem to a system-level strategy to solve the problem. Bringing in the governments, bringing in the private sector, bringing in a consortium of NGOs, bringing in all these different interests together to tackle the barriers that we were facing, and to really look at it at the size of the problem that was before us. And so those were 2 of the critical moments that helped with the transformation.
Thank you.
And so now I'm spending my time on building that alliance, which is what we call it.
So Gisela, what does Nutrivida look like in 10 years' time?
I hope it's going to be in all Central America, the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and I hope in at least 1 Asian country and 1 African country. And I'm dreaming about it as a bigger portfolio of products. We have been growing, and actually, thanks to the support of the McNulty Foundation, we invested in R&D to create more fortification vehicles, because we had a soup and we had a beverage, but everybody was like, okay, we like these, but give us more products. Yeah. So we created more products, and I expect that these products will be able to reach more people, and even more important than that, that everybody understands what the 1,000 days window means and the importance of for a baby and for a pregnant woman to have the right nutrition. If we can accomplish that, our
Thank you
project
very
will
much.
be great.
So the McNulty Foundation and the person who most embodies that, and McNulty, does many things for this family of laureates, not the least amongst them the capacity for truthful name dropping. So I can always say that, oh yes, I was with Madeleine Albright the other day, and things were going swimmingly between us. Ladies and gentlemen, the McNulty laureates, Patrick Ewa, Gisela, and Jordan Castelo.
connected to this thing.
No, apparently they wanted to stay for pictures.
The bar is open. We're going to do some photographs with the laureates, but this concludes tonight's program. Thank you all very much.